What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Busy, busy week. All kinds of different things happening, from international games. We've got Major League Soccer coming back in full force this weekend. Major League Soccer just signed a new broadcast deal with AppleTV. Of course, we have a U.S. game to discuss here. World Cup final places get solidified. Darwin Nunez is a member of Liverpool. All kinds of things. We're going to jump right in. We're going to begin with the very CONCACAF-y experience that was the U.S. men's national team's Nations League game against El Salvador on Tuesday night. And as I was watching this game and seeing all of these events unfold in the mud pit that these teams were playing on, the game that came to mind for me was October 15th, 2019. You might remember that one. It was the 2-0 loss to Canada. U.S.'s first loss to Canada in 34 years. Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Jordan Morris, Aaron Long, DeAndre Yedlin, Zach Steffen all started in that game. Christian Roldan, who did not feature in this game but is obviously still a prominent member of the U.S. men's national team, also started in that game. Michael Bradley did too. But I say this to emphasize the team that showed up on that field was the new iteration of the U.S. men's national team. It was part of this transition process out of the 2014 World Cup era and into all of these young players playing in Europe, the core of the team we see now that just qualified for this year's World Cup. So this was sort of the beginning of the changing of the guard and sort of one of the first real tests of this group of players and their mental fortitude. Watching that game back in 2019, the thought I kept having, the concern that kept going through my mind, and I was even talking about it with a friend on Twitter as this was happening, was I was concerned the U.S. had lost the scrappy underdog mentality, the mental toughness, the resilience, the grit that had defined this team for so long. Because there was no kind of resistance put up that night. Canada did whatever Canada wanted. You never felt like the U.S. was going to claw back in the game. They didn't put up a fight. You never felt like they were really making their presence known. It was one of the worst performances I've ever seen from the U.S. men's national team. And so that's always stuck with me. This is clearly the most talented team the U.S. has ever had. And so I was curious to see of course, this was very, very early in all of these guys' national team careers. So I was curious to see, as we move forward, as we got into the World Cup qualifying, was that toughness going to be something they were able to find? Or was this going to be just a completely different version of the U.S. that doesn't have all of sort of the intangibles that have made the previous iteration so enjoyable and the source of so much pride? We saw all of the grittiness, the perseverance, the toughness, the intensity, the edge, the nastiness last night. It's not the first time we've seen it, but that was my biggest takeaway because and we'll get into this a little later, but it's CONCACAF Nations League game against El Salvador. I'm just not putting a lot of stock in it when it comes to the World Cup. But you get the Ethan Horvath mistake where he just doesn't cut down the angle at the near post, thinks it's going to be a cross, maybe he gets stuck in the mud a little bit. Just a bad mistake and bad judgment by a goalkeeper who isn't playing very much for his club, and it does not appear will be playing very much for his club next season, depending on how this all shakes out with what Nottingham Forest is going to do at the goalkeeper position heading into the Premier League, but it certainly looks like they're going to bring somebody in that's going to be the starter. And that position is not going to be Horvath. So these are the kind of mistakes that happen when you have a bunch of goalies that aren't actually playing on a consistent basis. So that gets compounded when Paul Arriola gets sent off for what is a questionable red card, and of course this is CONCACAF, so we don't have VAR. It wasn't a horrendous red card, but to me that's a yellow. So now you're down a goal, down a man, and El Salvador is staring at their this golden opportunity to beat the U.S. for the first time since 1992, which is the other similarity I'm drawing between Canada here. Of you got some pride on the line. These are countries you should not be losing to. Now, Canada, of course, was on the rise and becoming a very good team, so that's a little bit different. But you have a streak going here. This is your opportunity to continue to assert continental dominance. Then you had the handball that gets missed in the box that was clear as day. VAR would have overturned it in a heartbeat, but of course we don't have VAR. Then Yunus Musa. I mean, it must have been 85 yards from where he started to where he actually ended up. Now, he didn't dribble the entire way, but he just went 80, maybe 70 to 80 yards and got behind El Salvador's defense and drew a red card. He was absolutely incredible in this game. I was a little skeptical, and of course, he's 19, He's going to be a sensational player. But there were times I just wasn't entirely sure he was ready to be a starter on a team with aspirations of going deep into a World Cup, just because he's so young and he hasn't played very much with this team because he kind of joined late. He is incredible. Why he's not playing more for Valencia, I will never understand. That was an awe-inspiring performance he put in last night. So now, you're 10v10. Jordan Morris ultimately does get the goal. You get the point, and it feels much better than losing to El Salvador for the first time since 1992. And this is where we've got to look at this result and the performance in two completely different contexts, because it means absolutely nothing heading into the World Cup. You're not playing on those kind of fields. You're not playing that kind of team. I'm glad Berhalter put out a good squad. That group of players doesn't have a lot to prove to me at this point. And anything they do have left is not going to be proven by playing El Salvador on a mud pit. And the other thing I want to tag on here is often I think people who don't follow the sport closely look at the group of teams the U.S. has to play to qualify for World Cups and just the World Cup qualifying cycle and who is on the schedule and go, why in the world are they having a hard time beating Honduras, El Salvador, Jamaica, whoever it might be? Because logically, you look at the populations, it makes no sense. You look at the talent, it doesn't always make sense. There were some, USL Championship guys out there, for example, for El Salvador. But the part of it that doesn't get taken into equation is the CONCACAF-ness of it all. I know we joke about it a lot, but it is absolutely a real thing. Both in the sense of you have teams that are from the get-go trying to stop you from playing and are going to hack your Giovanni Reynas and Christian Pulisic for 90 minutes and hope they can get something on the counter. That is an entirely different world than when you're playing in England, any of these teams in the U.S.'s group. The skill level is just raised so much that it allows you to actually play, which is why I firmly believe this group of players is, and we'll get into this more as the World Cup gets closer, but firmly believe this group is set up to be more successful at the World Cup than they are in World Cup qualifying. They are not meant to play on those kind of fields. They're meant to play in the shiny stadiums with all the other guys from Europe. And that's a change that the U.S. is going through because you haven't had all of these high-level European players ever before, this many of them. And so the other part of this is, not only do I think this group is set up for success at the World Cup, but generally speaking, part of the reason the U.S. always delivers at the World Cup and doesn't suffer any kind of embarrassments in going out in the group stage and finishing last in groups and stuff is because when you get through CONCACAF, playing a team that's a little bit better than you doesn't faze you because you're not dealing with all of the other stuff that comes with playing in this region and some of the environments in just CONCACAF. And so all I wanted to see last night from a World Cup standpoint was, okay, how are you going to respond? Some things have gone against you here. Even if you don't win, can you at least really take control of this game and make it clear you're not going to be pushed around, you are comfortable playing through adversity? They did much more than that. The mental side of this is huge to me, and this team has really, really grown, and you got to give Greg Berhalter a lot of credit for that. Because that Canada game I referenced earlier in October 2019 was, I feel like, one of the first times everybody kind of went, I'm not so sure this is a good idea. Maybe we need to go another direction in terms of manager. This team is completely different, 2.5-ish years later. So I don't have anything on this game heading into the World Cup other than this is another situation that, look, you got to deal with what's in front of you. Alexi Wallace was spot on at halftime. It's not CONCACAF's job. It's not El Salvador's job. It's not the Nations League job to prepare for the World Cup. So you deal with the elements, and you're going to be better for it when you don't have to deal with all that stuff and you can just focus on playing and play more to the way you actually want to. The second part of this, where this game absolutely matters, is just the overall trajectory of this team and this battle for dominance in CONCACAF that is raging now between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. I mentioned it before, but it goes without saying, you want to avoid things like losing to a team for the first time since 1992. Draws are going to happen away. It's not a huge deal. It happens to everybody in World Cup qualifying. But there is no reason that team that showed up on the field last night, the team that starting 11 Greg Berhalter put out, should have come away with nothing. Sometimes it happens, but you avoid the historical defeat part, which is important. And then the other factor here is this is a competition with a trophy to play for. And if the U.S. had lost this game, they're not in trouble in terms of winning this group to get to the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals. But they would have had work to do to ensure that they were showing up at it's called the finals, those final 4 teams, to get to the semifinals. And failing to do that is absolutely unacceptable. You're in a group with Grenada and El Salvador. You have to win. Absolutely have to. And again, this game would not, you're still going to get El Salvador at home. It should be fine. But getting that point was huge from that part of this too. Because the U.S. is, of course, the defending champions of the Nations League. I am all for, and will always be insistent, you have got to put yourself in as many positions as possible to go try and win things. I don't care what they are. World Cups, Nation League, Gold Cup, Olympics, because you have so few opportunities as a national team, you have got to capitalize on as many as you possibly can to put yourself in high-stress, high-intensity environments against quality opposition to simulate the kind of stuff you will see at the World Cup. Because so much of CONCACAF is very unlike what you see at the World Cup, as we just discussed. Right? You want games like the Nations League final against Mexico, where your back is against the wall, you're playing a really good team, you make some mistakes early, how do you respond? Can you solve problems? That kind of thing could happen in a World Cup. It's why I want Olympics are really important to me, because it's that next group of players, that next generation, getting to play in a World Cup-like format. And figuring, learning what it's like to go and camp out somewhere for a month and play in this longer tournament. The U.S., that's the next step. Got to start qualifying for the Olympics. too many miscues there recently. But that is the part of this where this matters, is the overall making sure the momentum is still moving forward, the trajectory of this team is still up. You absolutely expect them to, now that you've managed to rescue this draw, to get through to the Nations League finals, get into that 4-team tournament, and then we'll go from there. There's reasons I didn't write lessons learned columns on Substack for these 2 Nations League games. It's just, to me, they are completely separate from your 2 World Cup prep games you played against other World Cup opponents. And so you learn something different. It's not that one is necessarily better than the other. The World Cup ones are valuable just because you're so close and you don't get that opportunity very often. But I love the idea that they played 4 games. 2 of them were against the kind of teams you're going to see in the World Cup. 2 of them are in these incredibly, well, in this case, an incredibly difficult environment. You can rotate your squad a little bit, and you just have to learn to deal with different things. The perfect blend, and what this team is getting close to, is having the talent to play with an England, a Spain, I'm not even going to go France, Brazil, but to feel like you are competent or, and competitive from a talent standpoint when you get into the knockout rounds of the World Cup. And also, you have seen things and had to problem solve in a way that many of those European countries simply haven't. Even if the U.S. had lost, and this is where I'll end this discussion, but even if the U.S. had lost to this game, I am much more concerned about what is going on with, for example, England, who might get relegated from their own Nations League and just got destroyed by Hungary, than I am one game where the U.S. doesn't play well in a very CONCACAF situation where they should have had a penalty that didn't get given to them, their goalie made a mistake, etc. But they were able to wipe all of that away and stay focused and end up getting the draw. So, to me, there are way more positives than negatives to take away from that if you're a Greg Berhalter. Speaking of the World Cup, we now know all of the teams who will be participating in it. Our last 2 spots, Australia, Costa Rica. Australia, we have our first World Cup hero before the World Cup even actually starts. His name is Andrew Redmayne. Backup goalie. He comes in, replaces Matt Ryan, wins the shootout for Australia over Peru. Australia was good. It was a very, very even game that absolutely, I don't want to say deserved to end in a shootout because fundamentally that just seems disrespectful to the sport. And you just never liked seeing games end in shootouts. But the idea of it being tied after 90 minutes seemed very fair. It was a very, very balanced game. Either team could have won. Good performance by Australia. Peru showed up as well. The one thing I do want to say in terms of Australia moving forward here, kudos to the Socceroos for moving to Asian qualifying. Because this is their 5th World Cup in a row. And a big reason why is that they are so far and away the best team in Oceania, in their qualifying region, that it was basically a guarantee they were going to get in. And they said, we want to challenge ourselves. So we're going to go into Asia with a much higher level of competition. You're talking about, Korea, Iran, those kind of teams. Just the depth and the top end. It is significantly better. So all of a sudden, Australia is just another good team in a group of teams that feel like they have a chance to qualify for a World Cup every single time. It wasn't easy. They had to go through this whole playoff system to get there. But they didn't take the easy road in. And especially when 3 games and you're into the knockout stage of the World Cup. 2 more and you're into the World Cup semifinals. To throw away what is basically a guaranteed opportunity at that, to challenge yourself, and to hopefully help sort of develop and grow your soccer as a collective, national team program. Bravo. That was incredibly bold. And it ended up working out well enough. Plenty of stress there, but that's 5 World Cups in a row for Australia. Second team, the final team to get in, as I mentioned, Costa Rica. Joe Campbell scores almost from the opening kickoff very, very early on. That's all they need to beat New Zealand, which does a real disservice to how well New Zealand played in this game. Really good performance. Chris Wood had a couple really good opportunities at the end of the game to tie it, just couldn't put them in, couldn't convert. And that was after New Zealand also got a red card. You almost didn't notice because they were so dominant for stretches and really applied pressure once you got to the final 15, 20 minutes and they needed to find that equalizer. Just couldn't do it. Costa Rica was the favorite heading in for a reason. Just wanted to give a round of applause to New Zealand, a team that benefits from having Australia move to the Asian qualifying. They were, it's even hard to say Costa Rica, again, it was a very, very even game. And yeah, there's the counter of, okay, well, Costa Rica might have done some things differently if they weren't trying to hold on to a lead for 85 plus minutes. There is that part of it too that needs to be acknowledged. But bravo, New Zealand. A very, very admirable effort. Comes up just short. A big reason why it came up short is that Keylor Navas is still in net for Costa Rica. This is Costa Rica's 5th appearance in the last 6 World Cups. This is not the Costa Rica of years past where, they can make a quarterfinal. They absolutely look capable of getting even farther than that. You're at least not surprised if they get out of a group. This is a sort of strange combination of the holdovers from those teams who are well past their primes at this point, and this next generation that's coming in, but A, isn't as talented, and B, just doesn't have the experience yet. Keylor Navas solves a lot of those problems for you. He is absolutely incredible, and he is always, always great for Costa Rica no matter what. He is a huge reason why they even got to a playoff. He is the biggest reason why they won this playoff. He's terrific. I am really intrigued to see what they're able to do at this World Cup because they have been so consistent and so good at World Cups. This is just not the same team at all. But if you want one guy there, it's Keylor Navas. And fingers crossed, he's going to be there because Costa Rica is going to be there. So if for whatever, if I'm not going to jinx it. I refuse to write them off if he is in net. I will put it that way. Mentioned this really briefly at the beginning, wanted to expand on it and explain it a little bit. Huge news coming out of Major League Soccer yesterday. It is a 10-year, at least $250 million a year deal starting for the 2023 season with AppleTV. This is where Major League Soccer broadcasts are going to move starting next season. Every single game will be on Apple TV, no blackouts. It'll be a separate subscription. There are a lot of sort of intricate details here. It will be a separate subscription from your generic Apple TV Plus subscription. So you can just pay for the MLS stuff. My understanding is you're going to get some games with your Apple subscription, but if you want the full package, you just pay for the MLS Apple subscription. This also means the end of local broadcasts. There will be no local TV broadcast anymore because Apple has the rights to every single game. Now, what The Athletic and other outlets are reporting is that there is also going to be some kind of TV deal with ESPN, potentially Fox, to put some games still on linear TV. So it's not like Apple TV is going to be the only place you can watch MLS moving forward. But if you're trying to get, the equivalent of NBA League Pass and trying to have access to every single game so you can bounce around and watch any team anytime you want, Apple TV is the place you're going to have to do that. Doesn't mean you need an Apple device. You can access this with any form, any way you can get to the internet. So it's not like this is Apple driving you to have all these Apple products, but Apple is the person you're going to be paying for MLS moving forward. I was a little hesitant about this, and there are certainly questions, the biggest one of which is, do we really think, does Major League Soccer really think, putting this league behind a paywall, and a paywall that is not something as logical as ESPN Plus, right? This idea of, okay, sports fans very well may have ESPN Plus, so making it easy to see, hey, this MLS game is on, maybe I'll switch to that. That makes some sense because everything's going behind a paywall at this point. But to move it to Apple, where you have to go sort of seek it out and know that's where you need to go watch these games and purchase the subscription, is that something that's really going to benefit this league? The answer is I don't know, and I think it's a very fair question. The flip side to that, though, is, and where I've started to come down on this, MLS has never done well with TV ratings. Putting all of these games on ESPN, ABC, FS1, Fox has not done what the league wanted it to. It was the biggest reason why nobody thought MLS would be getting $250 plus million a year for its content, its games. So I'm okay with Don Garber and the league saying, we're going to try something else. We're not going to worry about the fact that we're not doing great on traditional TV ratings. There's certainly a downside. People are going to have to go find us. Local TV broadcasts, definitely a loss. But when you talk to the people in the markets where the local TV broadcast isn't always either available, easy to access, because those places absolutely exist, this gives you guaranteed access to every single game you want to watch, and you can follow your team start to finish, all 34. And the quality of these broadcasts I'm confident is going to be very, very good. In addition to just the broadcast, the other part of this where you're sort of making this trade-off with not making it easily accessible is Apple is going to be producing MLS sort of driven content, features on players, all kinds of exclusive stuff. Sort of the idea behind what you're seeing with Formula One right now, where you get these feature series going, and all of a sudden the sport is just blowing up because people are watching that and then they want to actually watch the races. It's kind of the same idea. And that is something MLS does not have at all right now. So you combine that with, you're going to have pre-game shows, post-game shows, all of that stuff. And there's going to be a whip-around show, similar to what CBS does with the Golazo show for the Champions League. You've got a host, an analyst in the studio. You're going back and forth between different games on Saturday nights, which is something I personally love and I think is a brilliant, brilliant idea. They've also started doing it for the Open Cup this year a couple times. So, yes, I see and believe there's going to be a price to pay, see the argument and agree with it. There's going to be a price to pay for leaving this thing in a very sort of dark hole, if you will, hard to find. But making it easily accessible was not working. This same kind of idea worked for Formula One. Of course, it's not apples to apples, but it's the same general approach of let's build up the coverage of this league. Apple's going to do that. I'm really excited to see what they come up with. The more I think about this, the more and more excited I am. Time will tell if it was a brilliant idea, but if nothing else, MLS got money it would not have gotten anywhere other than Apple. So Don Garber's at least got to get credit for that. Finally, real quick, before we head to our first break here, Darwin Nunez officially joining Liverpool. 32 goals this season between the Champions League and the Portuguese League. He's really good in the air. He is a lethal finisher. He is a perfect complement to what you're going to have with Luis Diaz on one side, Mo Salah on the other. He's the guy that Liverpool didn't have and has never had in the Klopp era, which is what he does really well is puts himself in dangerous spots, and when he gets the ball in those dangerous spots, he puts it in the net. You don't need him to create. It's not his strength, but that's okay because that's what Luis Diaz and Mo Salah are there for. What you need somebody to do is to be available to go head in all of Trent Alexander and Andy Robertson's crosses. That is what Darwin Nunez does. I love this. You're going to be able to get most of the money back when the Sadio Mane deal to Bayern goes through. It looks like it's in its final stages. You needed a replacement for Mane. You found one. Much younger. You're building the next generation of Liverpool attack here. Whatever happens in the short/medium term with Mo Salah, whether he's gone in a year, he stays for 5, you need to get some new blood into this attack. It started with Diogo Jota, then you brought Luis Diaz in, now it's Darwin Nunez. This is a really good piece of business from Liverpool. There's a reason he was basically the highest sought after young player in the world outside of Haaland. I just put Haaland in a different category because that was more Haaland deciding when he was going to leave Borussia Dortmund. Nunez, this was kind of okay, this guy is just, he's done everything he needs to do in Portugal. It's a question of what massive club is he going to end up at. So he was kind of the guy to go get outside of Haaland. And the final thing I'll say here is, yeah, Liverpool and Manchester City especially, but Liverpool to a certain extent too, may have had an immense amount of success playing without traditional number 9s. You know, Mane's not a 9. He can play it. Diogo Jota, not a 9. He can play it. But playing these guys who are not out-and-out strikers through the middle, they've had plenty of success doing it, both clubs. And what did they do this summer? Pep Guardiola just bought Erling Haaland, and Jurgen Klopp added Darwin Nunez. Life is easier when you have a true number 9.